When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Whether you're into comedians roasting each other's life choices or turning yesterday's bad decisions into today's funny stories, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Download the Amazon Music app and get in on the joke. Or go to amazon.com/ad-free comedy. That's amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite transatlantic football podcast. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me all the way across the water, all the way from San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Better than your voice, mate. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Yeah. You need some honey and lemon, I think, mate.
A lot of honey and lemon. I've spent the previous 5 days back on the mothership in Ireland, and it's been absolutely incredible, but also it's been a lot, and I'm feeling it a little bit today. Was there for a mate's stag do, my best mate's stag do. I was running it, and that was lots of fun. We were in Killarney, and then we went down to Cork to watch the All-Ireland hurling final between Cork and Tip, which was going really well until half-time, at which point Cork completely and utterly lost their heads and Tip went steaming through the gate. And so, yeah, a little bit disappointing in terms of how things finished in that regard. But alas, it was a wonderful weekend nonetheless. So all's good, mate. All's good. How are you?
I'm okay, mate. Yeah, I mean, the amount of travelling you do truly is extraordinary. You really should have a YouTube channel, like where you just have, of all this stuff that you've done. It would have been great. I mean, I don't know if the content would have been
wouldn't have been great. I think the content would have been pretty similar everywhere we went. But hey.
But to see where you've been, at least it would have been on record, whereas you'd have a lot to do to show for it, really, do you, mate? Like,
not really, mate. Happy friends. Happy friends.
A few memories here and there that kind of come back to you. But yeah, all good over here. Look, let's just crack on with it. I mean, it's transfer season, and it's been a good transfer window.
And it's starting to really pick up right now, it feels.
Yeah, and it's obviously started very well because of the Club World Cup, and there was some big deals early, and hasn't really stopped for too long. This week, we send the Ekitike to Liverpool move, get the green light. Obviously, Marcus Rashford has manifested a move to Barcelona, quite incredible. And now, in the minutes leading into us recording this podcast, Arsenal have finally got the here we go on Viktor Gyökeres to join them as their new centre forward, which was quite funny because it looks like there was an attempt to invite Man United back into the conversation at the last minute. I'm not sure what that's all about because even you and I know that Man United don't have that sort of money to just suddenly throw at a deal at the last minute. So I'm not sure why, high-ranking football officials don't know that. But there you go. I think those three moves, mate, are extremely exciting for the players and for football in general. I think that for Ekitike, a profile fit that completely different and in contrast to what we've seen for Darwin Núñez, who will be leaving Liverpool, just hasn't left yet. For Marcus Rashford, on a personal level, like it's bang or bust right now, isn't it? I mean, this is his final chance at, really. I say final chance; it won't be his final chance, but this is a very good chance to.
It's
make
maybe
the most
the final
of something.
chance at a really, really big gun. As in, if this doesn't work out, the next one is not going to be from the same kind of level, I don't think. And this is, this has come about in a lot of different ways. Obviously, we spoke about the Nico Williams transfer and that falling through. There's also an element of risk associated with it, with Rashford. I think from a Barcelona perspective, they're looking at it and saying, okay, it's a loan deal for someone who can play on both the left-hand side and through the middle of the nine if we need them to. That's a fit, with a bit more experience, which should, on paper, really be one that makes it work. Now, whether they're going to be able to get the players out the door and the departures are actually going to happen in terms that they can then register him, there are still some major question marks about that. And it was one of the things that, came about in that Nico Williams deal that fell through, that they weren't sure they were going to be able to do that, hence they pulled out. And thus, there's the kind of element of this, I think, is you're looking at it and thinking, okay, what happens here if they can't get those players out the door? They're taking a gamble. Marcus Rashford is therefore taking a gamble because there is a non-zero chance that he is not able to play football by the time that the transfer window ends at the start of September. So there's always a gamble associated with that. But as you said at the start, he's manifested this move. He's been the one speaking about it. He was like, I always wanted to do this. It has now come up at a moment where his career felt like it was a bit of a low ebb in terms of who wanted him and where he was going to go next. And suddenly it's all come, bursting through the clouds like sunshine for him. Now he has to take that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it's been ongoing for 2 months. His brother's been in talks with officials at Barcelona. So they obviously knew there was a chance of this, but for it to actually have happened, I'm still kind of in shock. But it could be great for him. I mean, the kind of news out of Barcelona at the moment is that the plan is not to use him as a centre forward. It's only to play him wide. But we'll wait and see. I can't believe that there won't be a moment when Rashford doesn't play through the middle for Barcelona. So that's interesting. As I say, Ekitike is a real change of tact. But speaking to someone this week at Liverpool, it's obviously kind of a calculated gamble in terms of the amount of money you're spending here on a player that hasn't reached the highest heights yet. But given his style of play and the way that he can create goals as well as score goals, it's going to change things for Mo Salah and the players around him too. They believe that, the one way to make sure that you're still getting the same out of Mo Salah is to kind of change the environment around him and keep him motivated, keep him excited about what's around him. And seeing as he's now got Ekitike and Florian Wirtz, and he's got Gyökeres and Frimpong, that's a nice situation for him to be in as well. So that's good. And then obviously Gyökeres is the elite game changer, I think, for that Arsenal have needed and that maybe the Premier League has needed. We've really needed something of this level to come back into the game. I was doing a show about Fantasy Premier League yesterday, and kind of since Harry Kane left, there's been a gap in the market for a star striker in the Premier League. And I think Arsenal might have just found it. It's taken a bit longer than they'd hoped. And they're obviously on their pre-season tour of Asia already, and they're in Singapore. And the hope was always that when they made that trip, that Gyökeres would already be with them so he could start getting up to speed. But they've had to be patient, and Gyökeres is absolutely given them the commitment that he wants to play for Arteta and wants to play for Arsenal. And they've done it. This is the one. This is the one. Like, Arsenal fans have been nervous. They've been a bit moany, if I'm honest, recently. Like the whole Madueke thing, when they were throwing their toys out the pram a bit because they wanted a bigger signing, and they've got him now. Like, there can be no excuses from where I'm sitting. You've leveled up. You've got a star forward. You know, he's going to make, you'd imagine, his Premier League debut at Old Trafford against Man United. That goal celebration that we've all seen with the hands across the face is likely to come for the first time at Old Trafford against Man United. And if it does, then, one, that away end will be going absolutely bonkers. But two, it will be the statement of intent that Arsenal can actually take that final step and go and win the league.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting signing. You know, I've said from the start that I thought that Gyökeres was a better fit than Sesko right now, in terms of if Arsenal are in win now mode, which is a phrase that's being thrown around quite a lot at the moment, that you want someone to come in. You know, Sesko is still a bit of a diamond in the rough. There are still elements of his game that I'm not completely convinced by. Gyökeres, obviously, there's going to be an element of risk associated with a transfer like this, in that he's been prolific for Sporting, but he's been playing in a space where he's been able to find those gaps, to get a little bit more room to run into. And he's such a brilliant driving runner when he gets into these spaces. But Arsenal have also, and I think this is interesting, been a team who have created a lot of opportunities through crossing. And one of the things that we've kind of looked at with Arsenal is, you know, their ability to not just at set pieces, but pick out those goals. We saw Mikel Merino having to kind of fill that role at times at the end of last season. And Gyökeres is not prolific in the air. He hasn't been. He didn't score a single-headed goal over the course of Primera last season, which I think is going to be interesting to see if there is a tactical shift there. What he is someone who can make things happen in dangerous areas. And I do really, really like the fact that we're talking about a striker here who is going to give them absolute 100% commitment with everything about him, right? Like, there is nothing about Gyökeres' game that isn't done at like full high-octane mode. He is a player who loves to run into those spaces, who will hassle, who will harry, who will be in those box areas trying to make things happen. And I think that for Arsenal, just having that different type of, you know, focal point and talisman at the top of this team is going to be really, really interesting. So we shall see. But I think that for Arsenal fans, this is the one they can finally relax over. And I think that that's a nice space for them to be. Obviously, on Ekitike, we've spoken about him before, and I always thought that fit was quite a nice one for Liverpool. You spoke about the fact that, you know, he's such a creative presence, and, you know, people will point out the fact that he played in the front two last year with Omar Marmoush for Eintracht. But his 7 assists, I believe 7 assists in the Bundesliga, all came to 7 different players. He's able to do some really interesting things in possession. He's a really lovely dribbler of the ball and someone that can carry the ball in different aspects. I think his link play is really, really impressive and kind of has been throughout this season. There is always an element of risk with these deals, right? And the same that there is about Gyökeres, the same to an extent that there is with Florian Wirtz. I think it will be fine. But I think that, you know, you're bringing in a striker whose finishing ability, or, you know, his kind of conversion rate isn't perfect, and that's been something that's been held against Darwin Núñez for long periods. And so if you're kind of doing it from that perspective, I do think that there is going to be a slight element of concern about the way that he, you know, underperformed his XG. That said, he gets into dangerous areas. You have to be in the right positions to miss chances. And he has been that player, as well as being so creative. So I think we're looking here, talking about 3 deals that are interesting for 3 different reasons. For Rashford's one in particular, I feel it feels a little bit last chance saloon at the very top of the game, as opposed to what we're talking about here with Gyökeres and Ekitike, which are 2 different transfers and come with different elements of risk, but they're probably the fits that I would have put for those 2 teams if I was picking individuals to go into them. And that, I think, is always exciting.
Let's end this segment with a hot take prediction from you on how many goals each of those players scores this season.
In just the leagues? Or
the league. Yeah.
I think we go something like a 18 for Gyökeres. Maybe like a 14 for Ekitike, but I reckon he'll rack up like 8-9 assists. So it could be close to that kind of double-double range. Mm-hmm. I think Rashford in the league, where I think he'll be used a little bit more sparingly, I'm going to maybe go with sort of an 11. No,
Oh, that's quite high for Rashford. Okay.
I think that he will get opportunities, but actually they might come in bursts as opposed to him scoring kind of every week for the first 10 weeks or something like that. So I think that they're three interesting signings. That is also obviously on the conduit that Rashford is able to be registered. He won't score any goals if they can't register him. I've just got to make that very clear.
Could be zero.
Could be zero.
Very good, mate. Right, look, let's crack on. Let's get into the second part where I'm going to start talking about some deals that I'm kind of surprised haven't happened yet.
When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Ever notice how ads always pop up at the worst moments? When the killer's identity is about to be revealed. During that perfect meditation flow. On Amazon Music, we believe in keeping you in the moment. That's why we've got millions of ad-free podcast episodes, so you can stay completely immersed in every story, every reveal, every breath. Download the Amazon Music app and start listening to your favorite podcasts ad-free, included with Prime.
Welcome back to Ranks FC, where it's time for us to have a little chat about some of the deals and players still on the market that are very exciting. Dean?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of these I did expect to have moved by now. And a couple of them I just thought might have because of the situations that they're in. And I guess that kind of applies to the guy I've got at number 10, which is Alex Isak. Obviously was linked with Liverpool, who did make an inquiry about him, as was anticipated leading into the window. And I think we probably mentioned that at the very start of the summer when I was talking through all of this. But Isak, for now, remains a Newcastle player. There's some links to Saudi Arabia right now, which is interesting given that Newcastle are owned by Saudis. So I can imagine there's some element of truth in that possibility. Obviously, Newcastle don't really want to lose Alexander Isak right now. And one thing that we're going to have to look out for is whether they can solve his contract situation or whether he's just left to run on the terms that he's already got. It's a complicated one, but Newcastle, as I've said before, if they truly rate Alex Isak as one of the top forwards in world football, then he needs to be paid as such. At the moment, he only earns just over £100,000 a week.
I know. It is all relative. Like when you talk about these numbers and you're talking them in kind of normal terms, obviously everything sounds absolutely.
I know. It's just sometimes
look at it into relativity, right?
Yeah. As the words are coming out of my mouth, I'm just like, imagine earning £100,000 a week. But I think he wants close to £300,000 a week, right?
Well, if he's a £120 million player, then you put them on those kind of wages, right?
And that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Works.
And Newcastle don't seem willing to go as high as 300, but would perhaps go to 200,000. So, yeah, that's complex and something that needs to come out in the wash. but obviously was kind of sent home from their pre-season game at the weekend, and that always raises some concern among fans and also continues to raise doubts about whether he is going to remain their player for the new season. So, yeah, had to put Alex Isak on the list here because I don't think we've seen the end of this situation yet.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised now if he's not a Newcastle United player, for next season. Now, that contract situation that you talk about there, and we've talked about for a little while now, is something that I think might well impact it comes next season if it's not been resolved. But I think that when you're kind of putting it in the context of what he is right now, I don't think that if Arsenal are signing Gyökeres, as we say, and Ekitike is through the door at Liverpool, I don't know where else he goes this summer to kind of say that, especially given that Newcastle United have Champions League football again. The thing with their defeat, obviously, to Celtic in that pre-season game was, one, not a great vibe for Newcastle fans, and two, the fact that Joel Linton was also injured but still in the stadium, I think was the thing that raised the eyebrows about it. Now, Eddie Howe has been pretty adamant that he will be going on their pre-season tour and that he's going to be back in kind of contention next week. But also, Newcastle look very toothless without Alexander Isak. Now, there are caveats, right? Obviously, Celtic are further along in their preparations. And, Brendan Rodgers spoke about this as much as Eddie Howe did. But I do think that William Osula remains very, very raw and didn't quite have the impact in this one that I think people were hoping for, to see that person who's going to try and step up from Callum Wilson in being the secondary number 9, not being able to have an impact in a game like this is something that people will raise eyebrows. Are Newcastle going to be kind of Alex Isak or bust? And if that's the case, then you've got to put him on, on the money that he wants if you want him to continue being that player for you on a long-term kind of contract basis. So I think it's interesting, although I would be shocked now if Isak moves this summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's also worth remembering that Newcastle are going to sign another forward. Spoken before in here about how Visser was in their sights, remains in their sights. Openda from RB Leipzig is another player that I have heard in the last 24 hours or so that perhaps emerges as another option. I mean,
be a very interesting move.
Yeah, it would be. And I guess it makes some sense when you consider the kind of profiles that they've looked at this summer. Obviously, they tried to get João Pedro as well. So, yeah, interesting to see where Newcastle actually end up with that. Let's move on to number 9, though, where I've got Rodrygo. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of huff and puff around this, but not a lot of actual concrete movement up to now. Obviously, there was strong links with Arsenal earlier on in the window. We were waiting for the Club World Cup to end to see if they would pull the trigger on trying to sign him. But as we speak right now, it's Liverpool who are talked about as being in direct contact for this player. He's going to move. Like I think it's a tough one for him because clearly he would love to remain where he is, but just must feel that he's just not going to fulfill his ambitions now if he does just stick and he needs to go and just play. So again, like if Liverpool do this as well, then it's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? But
it would be quite the summer. I mean, it's already quite the summer.
It already is. Like what they've done already is pretty extraordinary, but to go and throw Rodrygo into the mix as well, I mean, you're really making a statement in terms of like, you're trying to kind of rule for a decade at this point. It's not just about a one season dominance. It's like, okay, let's see if we can have one of those eras in football where we're the top dogs. Like, we've done it before, obviously. We've seen Man United do it. We've seen Man City do it. Arsenal had a small spell at it. But why not? Like, we've got the edge right now. And standing still would have been it would have been way too dangerous. So I think they're doing the right thing here. But yeah, what do you reckon? Rodrygo, is he good fit?
Yeah, I mean, look, this would be a complete retooling of the attack, right? And I'd be surprised if Liverpool brought in a Rodrygo without letting Luis Diaz leave. Obviously, we think that Darwin, as you say, is going to be off as well. So you're shifting an attack, which frustrated at times last year, fine, but actually was something that, went and won the league. So it would be a real bump. I mean, look, we've talked about this briefly, I think, on the Patreon before, but it is really interesting watching FSG kind of oversee this. You know, they basically held back last summer. Obviously, Mamadashvili joined for this summer, so that would have been a kind of fee moved on, and they signed Chiesa. But generally, it's kind of one of those where you're looking at it and thinking, what have they done here? Like, what's happening? And it looks like Liverpool are like, right, let's go out and completely reshape this, get rid of the parts that we didn't think were working out or who don't want to be part of the project. That's a very interesting thing. What a Rodrygo coming in would mean for a Cody Hakpo, or, you know, I assume it would be Hakpo that stays as opposed to Diaz that leaves, but there have been links for him as well, obviously, over the course of the summer. But I think it would be a nice fit. I always said that I thought that if Arsenal made this happen and they ended up with a front line that had Rodrygo and Gyökeres as well as Saka in it, that's a front line that has the potential to terrify absolutely anybody on the planet. And obviously they've retooled in the midfield as well with Zubimendi. They feel like the two doing battle at the top of this. Now, part of that is obviously that City made moves early and in January to try and start their kind of reclamation project in some ways. But it feels like at the moment it's Liverpool and Arsenal in this transfer window that are really, really putting their foot down. And I wonder if that is the kind of 1-2 we see again in the Premier League next season, because right now it feels like no one else is going to be able to break into that. Now, maybe that's a slight disservice to Chelsea, who've obviously just gone and won the Club World Cup. But I think over the course of a season, we'd need to see it from a more consistent basis before I start to put them in that conversation firmly, as in challenging at the top of the table. But I do think that you're kind of looking at it and thinking these are two clubs who are clearly on a mission to either, you know, extend the dynasty or finally get over the line. And it feels like they're involved in a kind of like arms race in some ways at this point. Now, obviously, we linked Isak with both of them, not just us, but they were the two clubs kind of in the conversation there. They're the two clubs in the conversation here at the moment as we see it for Rodrygo. And the fact that they've both gone and just bought a new number 9 suggests to me that they think that this is the moment for both of them. And as you say, Liverpool to kind of, you know, kick on and really push upwards, Arsenal to finally get over that line. And I think it's really, really interesting from a top of the Premier League perspective, because in some ways it feels like everyone else is kind of like, whoa, okay, look what they're doing. We're going to have to up the ante here. We've seen Chelsea go back in different conversations, Xavi Simons, etc., etc. But this now feels like it's kind of like a not a 2-horse race. I think that would be wild to exclude a City or a Chelsea from it completely. But it does feel like these two are really, really pushing the accelerator in a moment where less clubs are doing the same.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, Man City made a little push, didn't they, at the start of the summer to kind of bolster their ranks, and I think they'll be better than they were last season. Whether they're finished or not, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, even for City, some whispers right now about them being offered Morgan Gibbs-White again. We'll have to see. I haven't put Gibbs-White in this list, by the way, just because of that obviously deal to Tottenham pending, and Nottingham Forest playing games to try and stop that transfer. But yeah, we'll wait to see what happens, whether City can challenge those guys in the market. Let's move on to number 8, Jack, where I've got Xavi Simons, who has been, he's been available since the moment that RB Leipzig didn't qualify for the Champions League, basically. He didn't have a great time last season. From a personal perspective, was pretty frustrated, I think. But obviously, that transfer was a big one at the time. And Simons spent, his childhood being hyped up as a superstar in the making. And he hasn't quite actually fulfilled that potential yet. And he's on the market and he's been linked with a lot of teams. Most recently, there was Bayern Munich in the race. Arsenal were in there. Man City were in there. But now Chelsea are pretty firmly in the mix here. I wrote about this at the beginning of the week, how Chelsea was starting to take this seriously. He has been touted around a lot over the past month, 6 weeks. And Chelsea have become more intrigued by it. And I think it's because when you look at the profile of the player, he does fit pretty well in terms of the fact that they're looking for people that have got a bit more to give and they can elevate them. And that even if they spend a decent amount of money, there still is money to be made on them. And I think also they believe that they could probably negotiate a little bit with Leipzig at the moment and get him for a fee lower than the 70 million euros that's being pushed about. So it is interesting. I've got to kind of feed this one into number 7, which is Nicholas Jackson, because if Xavi Simons does join Chelsea, then Nicholas Jackson's going to be leaving, I think. It has to indicate that Jackson's leaving. I don't know that Jackson's going to be happy with a backup rotation role anyway. And obviously there's talks at the moment about where he could end up, and Man United are one of the clubs that have spoken through intermediaries about the prospect of this. Now, there are also reports that Jackson's going to cost between 80 and 100 million. Well, that's not going to happen. Like, Man United aren't even going to pay 60 million for Nicholas Jackson. So I think we're some way off of that sort of exit, but something will have to open up. But I guess the big question is, if you're a Chelsea fan and you're looking at your squad, how would you feel about Nicholas Jackson leaving and Xavi Simons coming into the club? I think you'd feel pretty good.
Yes and no. Like, Xavi Simons is a really wonderful player, and I think that his bad season or tough season last year wasn't necessarily all his fault. Leipzig had major issues kind of across the board, kind of is a little bit unfair on him. I think his numbers stack up. You know, I think it's close to 40 goal contributions in just shy of kind of 60 games for Leipzig over the course of a couple of years, which is very, very impressive output from a player like him. The question becomes, where does he fit? Is there going to be a Cole Palmer on the right-hand side? We saw Enzo pushed up further up in that kind of number 10 role. Can Chelsea play with a single pivot and 2 number 10s in front of him? Where are the options going to come here? And it feels like there's an extra player going in here who doesn't necessarily have a role. We spoke about the fact that one of the reasons that Chelsea liked João Pedro was that he could play both as a 9 and as a 10, and potentially off the left-hand side as well. There's a lot of players in here, and that's without taking into account the fact that the Willian Esteval comes in, right? We know that there's going to be, competition, heavy competition in his midfield phases, and there's no bad thing having depth and quality to come in and change over the course of it. We talked about the fact that it's a very, very long season from the start of the Club World Cup all the way through to the end of next year. That's a big campaign, a long campaign, and it's going to be very interesting to see how teams deal with that and the kind of tiredness that's going to come into it in the legs. Is that going to be by rotation? In Chelsea's case, it looks like it might well be. And so I think that Xavi Simons is a wonderful, wonderful player. Is there a natural fit for him here? I wonder if there is actually probably a more natural spot for him right now at Bayern, given that we know Jamal Musiala is going to be out for the foreseeable future. And it's something that the Bayern have clearly had an eye on for some time. I saw Florian Plettenberg kind of reporting on this and suggesting that it's something that the Bayern definitely are keeping in mind. Obviously there's the Nick Voltemade transfer. There's potentially going to be going through at some point. That's stalled at the moment, but there's a different kind of players going into different roles. But if I was Xavi Simons and I was looking at where the kind of opportunity to go and play my football and be that kind of creative fulcrum in the same way that I had been for Leipzig, I would maybe be wondering if that was going to be more obvious at Bayern right now than it is at Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we could roll this on and throw number 6 as Luis Diaz. I was going to actually put him higher up the list, but this is a much more suitable place for him, so I'm just going to stick him in here. Because Luis Diaz has been kind of throwing his toys out the pram a little bit over his contract situation at Liverpool. And it's weird, like I wrote in the Patreon Transfers from Paradise newsletter the other day, like I was summarising the situation and I just wrote, Luis Diaz wants to leave Liverpool or something to that effect. And a couple of the comments were like, whoa, like Luis Diaz wants to leave Liverpool. And I was like, that's pretty mad, isn't it? Like, you're part of this, like, one of the most famous clubs in the world. You've just won the Premier League. You're on the up and up. You're part of the plans. They're not actually looking to sell you. And you're going to push to leave. Now, look, everyone's entitled to kind of decide what their worth is in life, and maybe he feels he genuinely is underpaid. But I'm surprised that him and his agents, I should say, have made as much fuss as they actually have about leaving, and that If he was joining Barcelona, I kind of get it a bit more because it seemed always like that was kind of his dream. But yeah, I'm not sure that this one to Bayern has the same glamorous effect to it. Look, obviously you're going to win titles and stuff like that, but I'm just a little bit surprised. But anyway, Luis Diaz is another player that hasn't yet made his transfer this year. And if Xavi Simons doesn't end up at Bayern Munich, the likelihood is that it might be because Luis Diaz has ended up at Bayern Munich.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to see exactly what happens. Obviously, not similar players in the same kind of position, but I think if you're looking for some of creative hubs to take some of that weight off, considering that Musiala has gone, that Leroy Sané has gone, we know that there is going to be this kind of element of missing out on Florian Wirtz that's going to hurt Bayern because they would have seen themselves as favourites to go and sign a player like Florian Wirtz, and they've been kind of gazumped in that regard as well. I think they do need to bring in someone from a creative perspective. And if I'm looking at that from Luis Diaz's position, I suppose that you could make the same argument about the Xavi Simons thing, right? You're looking at it from the kind of discussion point of, if you are going to join one of these clubs, which one is going to give you the most opportunity? Now, he will have seen Florian Wirtz come in there. He will see these links to Rodrygo from a Liverpool perspective. He knows that Cody Gakpo also is someone that Arne Slot likes and trusts in these areas. And also, Luis Diaz became the favoured number 9 at points last season from Arne Slot's perspective, right? He was the guy in there linking things up. We saw that work as an option for him. If Ekitike has come in to be the number 9 there, that's even more limitations in terms of minutes. So I can't legitimately sit here and say, oh, why would Xavi Simons be thinking about joining Chelsea and not considering those minutes, and say the same about Luis Diaz. So I think that there's something probably in the fact that he might just be looking at it and thinking, is my pathway going to be blocked here from a number of different perspectives and in a number of different positions? And if so, going and joining a Bayern at a moment where they're crying out for a little bit of creativity might be something that's very exciting from that perspective. And especially as, they go back to winning ways last season, as you see, that we get back to a point where Bayern feel like they could be contenders in the Champions League again. And you're kind of looking at it and thinking, well, this is a moment to potentially join them, especially with, seeing the amount of exits from Leverkusen and seeing that as an opportunity to go and kind of stack up the silverware cabinet as Bayern kind of retake control of things. I can see why players are interested in that.
Oh yeah, of course. I get that too. But I can't believe how much there is still to happen in this transfer window, the more that we're doing this show. Do you know what, Jack? I'm going to take a breather there and let's do the rest in part 3.
When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks. Welcome back to Ranks FC Part 3, and we're rattling through transfers that might be yet to happen. Just before we move on, Dean, to those top 5 players, someone I just wanted to mention there, and we didn't really reference him in this conversation about Bayern Munich, about Leipzig, about Chelsea, but Christopher Nkunku remains in a strange position. Now, I was surprised how many minutes he got at the Club World Cup, and seeing him played in different positions and starting to think, hang on, is this a way back? Is this a route back? But the fact is that we're talking about a player who hasn't been able to crack it at Chelsea for a variety of reasons, and not all of which are his fault. But if there is talk of Xavi Simons joining Chelsea from Leipzig, if there is talk that Bayern Munich are in need of creative players, Nkunku should probably be on the table for both, potentially as part of any sort of swap deal between Chelsea and Leipzig, but also considering that the Bayern Munich might be looking for someone to inject a little bit of output and creativity into their own number 10 role with Jamal Musiala injured.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I should probably have thrown him into the mix when I was talking about that, because he's absolutely a player that is in the market for a transfer. There has been interest in Nkunku across this window. Nothing has actually advanced yet. But yeah, Chelsea definitely looking to move him on. And I think from a personal perspective, he needs to go too. It has been mooted, the idea that Simons goes to Chelsea and that Leipzig would be interested in taking Nkunku the other way. But I'm not sure how those valuations balance up in Chelsea's mind. I don't know. Even though they're not using Nkunku, they seem to value him quite highly. And so I don't know that will work out. There are still clubs touching base about Nkunku. Newcastle are one of the latest that I've heard about. So he will move. And I'm like you, I'm very surprised how much he played at the Club World Cup. But I think that was also just, this is our squad right now for this tournament. Make use of it, and also kind of put him in the shop window, show what a good player he is. Isn't it bizarre that you can be that good at football and a club doesn't want you? Like, that must be such a weird feeling.
Well, we could put that about almost everyone.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, but
Rodrygo being potentially on the way out of Real Madrid still blows my mind a little bit. Now, I know there's overstack on that left-hand side, which remains his preferred position, but it's true. Like, you can come in and have that kind of impact in the Club World Cup. And I thought Nkunku was excellent. Really, really good. I've always quite liked him as a player, but just the fit never felt quite right at Chelsea. And then suddenly you're like, oh, could he play a different role? Is there a space for him somewhere here? But then you see Jamie Gittins coming in and you see João Pedro coming in. And you're thinking, well, where do they all fit? So it does feel like it's one of those where they're just trying to make the jigsaw pieces tuck a little bit nicer at Chelsea. But bringing in a Xavi Simons, I think, would spell the complete end. If that is the case, and he does end up at Stamford Bridge, I would bet my house that Nkunku would then leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the list. At number 5, where I have Benjamin Sesko, who seems a little bit stuck to me. I don't think there's that many landing spots for Sesko, and I think that Leipzig are probably having a tiny bit of a panic up now. Not because they obviously, if Sesko stays, it's not the end of the world in terms of, obviously they're going to be a better team for it. But at a time when they're looking to raise cash, he's pretty much your top dog. And that battle between him and Gyökeres to end up at Arsenal, which this side of the argument is now lost out on because Gyökeres has gone to Arsenal, has kind of left him in a weird situation. And they were very stubborn, obviously, over his valuation and his clauses. But, Man United are the team that are being forced into this conversation now. And I just don't see how Man United can afford to buy Benjamin Sesko. Unless they are suddenly becoming open to reduced terms or a different type of payment structure around this, I don't see that Man United can get involved in it. Now, obviously, Christopher Vivell is at Man United now and is kind of the guy driving this interest because he knows the ins and outs of it from the Leipzig end of things. But there are people that at United, as I understand it, that aren't convinced by the transfer, both in terms of how much they would have to pay for him, the fit for the team, and whether this is actually the type of profile forward that Ruben Amorim actually wants right now. Now, look, at the end of the day, Amorim just wants somebody that's better scoring goals than Rasmus Højlund. So, yeah, Sesko should do that. But he's not Osimhen, is he? And that's the guy that that's the kind of striker they wanted. So, a really strange one here. And while all the other ones, I'm pretty confident do get sorted out, this one I keep going, but where's he going to go?
Yeah, I'm completely with you. And also the other thing that I think is really interesting here is that at first this summer it felt like that Sesko would be the one that departed Leipzig. That would probably cover them in terms of where they needed to be from a financial standpoint. I think the fact that Xavi Simons is now potentially on the table is probably part of this. Like, the fact is that they've gone, well, we still need to make money, and I don't know if there's a landing spot for Sesko anymore. I think the fact that you mentioned right at the top that Newcastle might well be interested in Lois Openda now, who for my money, I think might be the smarter buy at this point. I think Sesko has the higher ceiling, but I think if you're looking for a player to come in and sort of just be ready and have a little bit more of a varied skill set, I've always really liked Openda from that perspective. So the fact that there are other players being talked about from an exiting RB Leipzig standpoint, I think probably does speak to the fact that they might have been like, ooh, we've just lost our big chance to sell him. Now, whether that means that they get to maintain for another year, if he has another good year in front of goal, that his value isn't going to go down at this point. So that's okay. But I do think it's interesting that Leipzig are talking now about selling other players within their arsenal in order to potentially get over the financial issues that way. Probably speaks to the fact that Sesko is maybe not going to go for the figure that they kind of thought. And thus, if they're not going to get the valuation for him that they expected, then maybe they hang on an extra year. And I wonder what that does for Sesko, because there was all of this talk in January about him coming to a gentleman's agreement with the club, that they would sell him for the right price, etc., etc., etc. And all of that seems to have just gone completely quiet in the mix of what's happened this summer. And now the fact that the Viktor Gyökeres has gone to be Arsenal's number 9. I do think this one's very interesting. And again, I think you're probably right in that of all the transfers we've spoken about thus far, maybe bar Isak, who I really don't think is going to go anywhere. Like, Sesko feels like the person you've discussed here since then, who I think is the most likely to be at his current club when it comes to September the 1st.
Yeah, exactly. Really, really strange one. But obviously, agents will benefit from him moving, and therefore they will probably find a way of getting him out of there and into a new club. Let's move on, Jack, to number 4, where I have Marc Guehi of Crystal Palace. I'm surprised that this hasn't happened. I mean, it's been kind of on the card since January that Guehi would leave Crystal Palace, and he's had so much high-profile interest within the Premier League. And, you know, his contract situation isn't great from a Palace perspective. He clearly has ambition to go. And nobody's come and fronted the money to come and get one of the best, most proven centre-backs in the Premier League. So, you know, whether it's Tottenham, Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool, Newcastle, like all these clubs have had serious interest/intent around actually going for Guehi. And here we are heading towards the end of July and heading towards a Premier League season that starts in 3-4 weeks, and Guehi's still a Crystal Palace player. I've got a feeling that this one ramps up within the next week. I think that the kind of things that I'm hearing and suggest that this is going to move forward quite fast soon. I have to admit, I don't know where it'll end up. Chelsea definitely still in the mix on this one, by the way. But even you look at Chelsea and you're like, well, he comes in. Who's missing out? How are you suddenly changing the back line? Newcastle obviously have remained in that conversation since they last tried to sign him. And then maybe he's just clinging in there in the hope that Liverpool go and do another big one, because imagine they get Marc Guehi as well. So, yeah, a lot going on for Marc Guehi, and I'm sure that there are movements behind the scenes on this. But I am surprised that this one has dragged on as long as it has.
This one feels to me like there's loads of dominoes waiting to fall on the back of it. Now, there's a couple of things here. One is obviously the Palace interest in Ousmane Diomande from Sporting. And you wrote a piece on Give Me Sport earlier this week about that and the fact that the Palace kind of were in it. They probably can't move on that until they get a fee through the door. You know, obviously they've signed Walter Benitez, they've signed Borna Sosa, but it feels like those kind of moments have come now and you're like, oh, okay, is someone going to have to leave before you can go and splash that cash? And that would make sense, I think, from their perspective. You know, at this point, is it going to be something, because someone coming into a back three as well, who's been absolutely exceptional in that role for Sporting, I think is an interesting one from an Oli Glasner perspective. But also, I think that there are other things happening here. And look, you go all the way back to that Rodrygo conversation with Liverpool and the fact that Real Madrid seem to hold this long-standing interest in Ibrahim Konate. Do they have to make that move work before Liverpool would move for a Guehi? And therefore, does that kind of change the picture from that perspective? As you say, are Chelsea going to get one out the door? Do we see kind of the departure, I don't know, of a Benoit Badiashile or someone like that in order for kind of Chelsea to start moving at that point? Because Badiashile was like, I will be playing for Chelsea next season. I was like, I don't think that's completely up to you, if I'm honest. Like, I think that if the club get a right offer for a Badiashile, they sell and reinvest. I think it's been fine, and I don't think they would be unhappy to be starting the season with Badiashile as third/fourth choice centre-back. But if that right offer comes in, maybe that changes. And to be honest, I think from a Chelsea perspective, I've been kind of critical of maybe them going and signing a Xavi Simons or trying to understand how that would work. Whereas with a Guehi, I'm like, I think you probably come in, you know, Wesley Fofana and Levi Colwill, I think, is the preferred centre-back partnership. But can you trust a Wesley Fofana to go and do, you know, a season that Chelsea have in front of them, not on the evidence we have in front of us? So for them to come in and bring in a kind of highly proven Premier League centre-back who has links to the club coming back in there, I think would make sense from their perspective. That's where I can see it. From where Chelsea would come from. But I think that this one feels like there's lots of things happening around it. And his destination, I'm unsurprised by you saying I don't know where he actually falls here, because I think that it's going to rely on certain things happening elsewhere to kind of kick this one into gear. And that, for me, I think is the really interesting thing about the Guehi deal. And, you know, I'm pretty sure that if Palace fans, you know, were looking at this and thinking, yeah, Diomande is a really good player, but also if Guehi ended up staying, you know, is that the end of the world from a Palace perspective? I think not, right? Like, I think they'd be delighted that he was still at the club. And even if that kind of stops them moving elsewhere on that Diomande deal, is it worth having someone who's in, solid, proven and done, as opposed to kind of moving on and taking a gamble at someone who's been exceptional at Sporting, we should add it, but also would still be someone coming into a new league and seeing how it goes. So I think this is a really, really intriguing one for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah, it is worth bearing in mind with Sporting that they're going to be extremely difficult to deal with from here out. You know, whether it's Diomande or Hjulmand or anyone else, like if they've got a release clause, I don't think you're getting them to budge on it anymore. Like, I think they've really had enough after this Gyökeres thing. But
also, like, they don't need the financial kind of implement now at the same time, right? The Gyökeres deal is gone. Maybe not quite exactly what they wanted from a fee perspective, but they're not miles off it. They no longer need to kind of bring in that cash through the door in order to reinvest. And therefore, if it's a bit, you know, you're at that kind of point where you're like, well, no, we'll sell, but only if you meet our valuations for players. And look, that's well within their rights at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Diomande is probably a little bit annoyed right now, I reckon, about this Gyökeres move and how it's impacted his own departure. But he's not in the list, so I'm not going to go into the depths of that one right now. Before I get to another Crystal Palace player, I'm going to throw in one of our old heroes, mate, João Palhinha. I just can't believe how badly this transfer to Bayern Munich has gone for him. Like, after the fuss that was made to get him there, the delay, because obviously he had a failed move there before he actually moved there, and then obviously an injury setback, but was struggling to force himself into the team anyway, even without that problem. And now we're to pre-season and looking to the new season. And the noises are not great in terms of Palhinha having a spot within that midfield setup. And of all the figures that are actually there in the mix, he sounds to me like he might be bottom of the pile. Now, Palhinha has definitely had interest from Premier League clubs in this window. And in the last 2 weeks, Tottenham's interest has ramped up around Palhinha. So Man United and Fulham were kind of first to inquire, as I understand it. And that was because they thought he might be available on loan. And if they were, they wanted to know that they were definitely interested. Tottenham have obviously kind of changed their outlook on what they would do in this transfer window. And they're showing much more ambition than they probably would have if they hadn't won the Europa League. And they've really come into this Palhinha conversation. I'll be honest, Jack, from a personal, selfish point of view, I'll be annoyed if João Palhinha ends up at Tottenham, because that's a great signing. And I don't like it when Fulham players end up at Tottenham because typically they ruin their careers. But to be honest, Palhinha's career is already on the verge of being ruined if he stays at Bayern Munich. So this might not be the same situation for once. But yeah, Palhinha is extraordinarily good at what he does best.
Yes.
And if that's not in fitting with what Bayern can do, then he has to get out of there as soon as possible, because he is too good at that to just sit around waiting for opportunities.
I think it's a really interesting deal, this. Now, like, Thomas Frank has played at Brentford, and again, we're going to see changes in what that structure of Thomas Frank team looks like. Now he's getting one, players in who look like they can raise the level, but two, also it might be kind of structurally different. We've seen him kind of play a variety of different things over his time at Brentford, from the Championship all the way through, and it's been kind of interesting seeing that dynamic change. But he has kind of consistently had a ball-playing midfielder at the base. You know, someone like a Christian Norgard who can make sure that the ball is kept, who's allowed to circulate in those areas. That's not really what JP does, right? Like, João Palhinha is a kind of destructive presence with an excellent cross-field ball. That's the kind of two things that we saw from him on a regular basis. That he has the ability to spray passes, but also his best attribute is winning the ball back in dangerous areas. And he can be a one-man wrecking ball. He's the kind of player that allows you to play with a single pivot at the bottom of your midfield. And maybe that's something that Spurs are looking at. You know, we're not going to talk about Gibbs-White today, as you said, but the fact is that if Gibbs-White was being looked at in those areas alongside a James Maddison, for example, you probably do need someone who's going to be in there just winning the ball back and giving it to your more creative influences. And that is something that the Palhinha, I think, could do, could be that kind of one-man wrecking ball at the base. And so it makes sense from that perspective, I think. If he is available on loan, it would make sense from a Spurs perspective to fill a short-term gap. I don't know if he's the player that you would want in there kind of long-term if you're building a midfield. And I say that with all love for João Palhinha. I just think that his kind of destructive tendencies are the best part of his game. And if you're looking for a team that are going to control, then maybe you don't have someone like him in there. But I think in terms of a short-term fix, if there is a loan deal to be had there, that feels like the kind of move that Spurs should be making. And whilst I agree with you that players who have kind of made that switch from Craven Cottage to, well, the old White Hart Lane mostly, haven't really succeeded, this one feels a little bit different, I think, from that perspective.
Yeah, look, he'd be a great signing. I'll tell you what's also interesting is anyone that plays FPL, there's a new rule that's just come in around defensive contributions. So players who are DMs or centre-backs now have a better capacity to get points in the Fantasy Premier League game. And I was looking at it the other day, I was like, this was João Palhinha, man. He's the sort of player you could never pick in FPL because he just wouldn't give you enough. I mean, he obviously popped up with the odd goal. But now, this defensive contribution thing, if he comes back into the Premier League, I'm considering him, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, let's see what happens with Palhinha. I think he will leave Bayern Munich, and I think a move to the Premier League would make sense for him, seeing as he was so good within the Premier League.
100%. When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks.
At number 2, Eze. Eberechi Eze. He's been waiting. He's been waiting for his big move, and he's done his bit for Palace. He's done wonders.
Episode for Palace fans.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Crystal Palace fans. I am, but what this player's done for you, and the cup final moment, and all the rest of it. Like, he's obviously going to be someone that I hope continues to be adored even beyond, these moments. But I think Arsenal will go for this one. I think they should go for it, and I think they will. Obviously, it's taking way longer than would have been ideal. And I think that Arsenal supporters are concerned about whether it's going to happen at this stage. But obviously, if they also got Eze through the door, it really does look like an unbelievable summer. Arteta is very much now on board with Eze coming in. I'm assuming that this goes hand in hand with there being an exit at Arsenal. There's been recently the Ethan Nwaneri contract situation they were trying to sort out. And my feeling is that Trossard or Martinelli has to go for this to happen.
I would agree.
And I think that will happen. And my hunch right now would be it's Trossard, but I don't think it matters which one really. There has definitely been contact. Eze has kind of been hoping for Arsenal. There's been other clubs, obviously, in the mix, Chelsea being one of them. But as I understand it, Chelsea haven't really pressed this home in the past couple of weeks, which suggests that they're not going to at this stage. So let's see whether Arsenal, now that they've got that Gyökeres thing sorted, maybe this has to be the focus. Now, obviously, there's the Rodrygo thing that's been running on too, but I get the impression they prefer Eze at this point. I think that Eze is the guy that they want. And I think that the optimism that would be raised by securing this signing before the start of the season would just have that fan base absolutely buzzing and believing that, we've done all we can. Like you say, it does get thrown around a lot, but win now is clearly what they're having to do. They can't have any more false dawns. And I think Eze knows that his moment's coming. I don't see any possibility really of him being a Crystal Palace player for the duration of the next season. Maybe he'll be there for the first week because maybe it doesn't happen just yet. But I think Eze does get his move.
Yeah, I mean, it's an intriguing one, isn't it? Because obviously there's European football on the table at Palace now. Now, it's not the European football that they wanted originally, but it is still a chance to win a major trophy. I think Eberechi Eze remains quite grateful for the opportunity that Palace gave him in the Premier League after having such a weird youth career where he bounced around so many teams and kind of suffered so many rejections, that Palace kind of felt like a place where he could come in and make his mark. And the way that he operated in the second half of last season in particular was just so incredible to watch on pretty much every level. He really did take that mantle up. This would be a massive, massive blow from a Palace perspective in terms of who comes in to replace that kind of output, that kind of creativity. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you replace that if you're Crystal Palace. But I do think that, he will look at this and think, I should probably be playing Champions League football now. And he also, the flip side of this is, the question mark over the World Cup next summer, right? Eberechi Eze will hope to be in that squad. Does he improve his chances by going and playing Champions League football? I think the answer is probably yes. And whilst that's harsh, as Fulham fans, we know that the food chain is what it is. Now, does that mean I think that Eze should leave? Not necessarily, right? Like, he gets there. He is the guy at Crystal Palace. He creates, he scores, he makes things happen. And I think that there is a sense with that, when you know what you're going to get and you know what you're kind of offering with Eberechi Eze, he's not going to kind of fall off a cliff by any chance, which can happen after you make a move to a bigger club. But I think he backs himself at this point, and it feels like probably the right time for him in his career to maybe make that step up to Champions League football. And whilst that's not going to be nice from a Palace perspective in any stretch of the imagination, I do think that if the right offer came in, he'd probably be like, yeah, I think this is my time.
I have to say, I do think this would be scary for everybody else in terms of Arsenal having so many variations in their attack. Already Madueke going in, Gyökeres now landing. If you've got Eze as well, plus obviously like Saka's, so much has rested on Saka. And when he's not there, there is that fear factor of whether you're going to have the same edge in attack. And that's not going to be as much of a worry for Arsenal anymore. And for opposing teams, you're not only worried about what their starting lineup is and which kind of rotation it is of forwards that actually start, but who's coming off the bench and when. That's scary too. So this would really elevate Arsenal. And back to that conversation we were having earlier about them and Liverpool, just not willing to rest in this moment and just giving it everything they've got.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, there are good and bad bits about that. And, we spoke about it with Chelsea, and you can be oversaturated and players can get frustrated if they're not getting the opportunities. I think you're right on that. If Eze comes in, they definitely need to lose one. The fact that he can play 10 and potentially be a rotator of Martin Odegaard as well in that space is probably quite an interesting thing from an Arsenal perspective, because we know that he was kind of worked down to it. And towards the end of last season, he stopped having the same kind of impact. If you can make sure that he's rested and given the opportunity to control games the way we know he can, and suddenly that's a very dangerous conversation as well, right? So there is a level of like trying to find the right balance between oversaturation and depth. I think is a really hard thing to do, especially that we don't know exactly how many games people are going to play over the course of a season. But it does look like a big season, and I think rotation is going to become important. And that's the kind of thing I have with Chelsea, I think, in particular, is like, I like the fact that they've brought depth in. I'm just wary that at the moment it feels like there's just two players too many, I think, in there, especially if Xavi Simons comes in. And at that point, how do you fix it? How do you make sure that the opportunities get given around? So, it's a really hard balance to strike, but that's what club executives are trying to do, right? They're trying to find those balances, make sure you have the options, but also you still can, maintain everyone's happiness in the same way. That's a tricky thing, but also can be the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you ready for number one?
I am ready for number one.
Jadon Sancho, Alejandro Garnacho, Antony, Casemiro, Onana, Malacia and Højlund. What's going on?
I wondered when you were going to do this.
Why can't Man United get rid of anyone? Like, it's just had to, I just wanted a different way to end the show today. And I thought, you're ranking stars waiting for a big transfer, but at United, you've just got, kind of big stars waiting for any transfer, just to kind of get out of there, and United need them gone, and they just don't manage to do it in a decent amount of time.
This makes sense from some perspectives, not all of them, right? But if I'm Betis, I know that Antony wants to return, right? Like, I know he wants to return. I know that the optics are there. I also know that the money isn't there currently in order to make that transfer work. And all of the stories in Spain are currently about Antony and Dani Ceballos, both, potentially returning to Betis next season. Obviously, been away for different periods of time. But like, Betis is just sitting there and going like, well, we'll just wait, because we don't think anyone else is going to put this on the table. And so if you're Betis, you're like, obviously, ideally, you would sign Antony right now. But equally, if the options are, well, Manchester United are currently not budging on a valuation of 50 million. And they know that, well, we're not going to pay that. We'll offer you 30 and we'll just wait. We'll wait until the end of the window. And you'll be like, what are you going to do? Leave him just there, sitting there? So for other teams who know these players have no future at Manchester United, it makes no sense to go in early with valuations that Manchester United want. And look, that's part of the issue. And it's part of the issue of clearing out a squad which has so much deadwood in it. But like, from everyone else's perspective, I can sit here and be like, well, why would you make an offer right now? Because there's no real need to, because the United are going to have to budge on those variations, on those valuations when it comes down to the final days of the window, because they need these players out the door.
Yeah, exactly. And look, out of that list I read out, Casemiro's probably staying. And actually, as I'm told, that they don't see that as the end of the world. Like, Casemiro's come back for pre-season looking lean.
That's also fine. Like, you can have Casemiro in a rotation because he's trusted. And look, Amorim has showed that he will trust him. He's not going to play him every week. But equally, I think that there is a level to that where you're like, Casemiro being part of that squad with that experience is not the end of the world if you're not trying to utilize him and squeeze him into the ground. Like, if you're just using him as a player who's able to rotate, able to freshen it up, that's fine. He's still, one of the best players we've seen in that position. Now, is he as good as that anymore? No. But like, in terms of what he brings to the table from an experience perspective and in the dressing room, that is nowhere near the same level of issue as I think as some of the others you mentioned there.
Yeah, exactly. Onana obviously staying for now. And then you got Sancho going to Juve. You got Garnacho going to probably Chelsea or Tottenham. Antony to Betis. Højlund anywhere that will take him. So those things will happen, but like, it's like, why are we always heading towards the start of the season or towards deadline day for you to sort these things out? No matter which version of Man United we get in a boardroom, like these days, they just can't change the picture. Like, it's always the same, and they put themselves into this situation. It obviously doesn't help when like there's leaks of Amorim telling players, you better pray you find a new club. And you're like, okay, well, that's not going to help your valuation of the player, is it, mate? Like, that's probably not a great idea.
All of this is the same thing. It's all just endemic in the situation. And like, you should be at a point where, think back, and there were points where, United's players were being picked off for record fees by the biggest clubs in the world. They're so far from that right now.
Yeah.
It feels like, that until these players all depart, and look how many times we've seen them go out on loan somewhere or kind of change and then end up back in the same situation next year because no one will meet the valuations that United paid in the first place. And look, you can't blame the current regime for the sins of the previous, right? But you can kind of look at it and think you need at some point to just cut your losses here and be like, get rid of these players, even if it's not a fees you want, because you can't keep going through the same thing every summer. You have to just at some point accept that was a mistake and there were mistakes were made and that things had to change before you can kind of move forward into this bright new future that everyone's been promised. You have to kind of make sure that the door is closed. And the fact that this happens again and again and again means that it's the same conversation every single summer.
Yeah. There's also some interest, some talk at least, of Kobbie Mainoo having a potential offer soon from Tottenham, which would again be extremely interesting to see what would come out of that. So let's see, just one to keep an ear out for Mainoo in the next couple of days. But yeah, interesting, mate. I had to end on that one just as a bit of fun. But also I didn't know which one of those players to put into the list, so I had to find a way to get them all into one talking point.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't even included João Felix and people like that. There's still loads of people I haven't actually put in here.
Yeah, João Felix is a very strange one right now. It's a funny old place for him, and I do wonder what's going to happen there. But it doesn't look like that one's moving fast anytime soon. So we'll see. But that feels like a loan on deadline day. I'll be perfectly honest with you at this point. As do many of those Manchester United players for the same kind of point. And I think on that note, DJ, it's probably time for us to call it a day. So all that's left for me to do is a massive thank you to you for carrying this episode.
No worries, mate. You go and get that honey and lemon too.
I will get through it. It's got better over the course.
Yeah, it has got better. The more you talk, the better it's got.
We've improved over it. So that's something to be grateful for. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. And we'll see you all very shortly, Rank Squad. Take it easy. Peace. When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks.